So A'ja Wilson has done it again. She's done it again where it's like she just does not help herself with a lot of some of her like interview answers, because like, look, A'ja Wilson's really damn good. She's really good at basketball. But like, I've heard her be described as the queen bee of the Mean Girls Club in the WNBA. And that actually might like describe A'ja Wilson. And look, I'm not somebody that claims that, like, I've watched A'ja Wilson play pretty much since she's been in the league. She's exceptional. She's brilliant at basketball. I think the reason why the Aces are bad is not on her as much as it's on Becky Hammon's, like, force feeding A'ja Wilson instead of just letting her, like, I think she could average 21 and be better than averaging 27. But it doesn't mean she's not, like, if you argue her any lower than fourth in the world, you are crazy. You are crazy. If you argue her lower than third, I still think you're on the cusp of being crazy. If you argue her second, it's like, maybe. But she's probably the best player in the world. She probably is. Like, she is the equivalent of if Joel Embiid was an Iron Man in the NBA. And I think if Joel Embiid was the Iron Man and won a couple of titles, people would be calling the best in the world. As far as stylistically, she is similar to Joel Embiid. So I do want to talk about, like, obviously when we want to talk about basketball, we talk about basketball. And the problem is that A'ja Wilson's making sure as hell we don't talk about basketball. She's making sure as hell we don't talk about basketball. Because I'm just saying, we look at, the funny thing is that the person that she has the biggest problem with, and there is no player that has tried to uplift more players in his league than Caitlin Clark, publicly. Behind the scenes, there's Stewie, there's Fee Collier, who are doing like all these huge things, who are trying to keep the players in America. Like Stewie, Fee, the likes of Kelsey Mitchell, whoever, like the big players, heck, even Sydney Colson, the big players out of Athletes Unlimited. A'ja Wilson is essentially me. And then if you're not focusing on her, man, I hate being A'ja Wilson. Sometimes I just don't want to be A'ja Wilson. And when you're not giving her attention, he's like, me, I need attention. And it's like if you've ever watched the South Park episode where they're talking about Meghan Markle, where it's like, we just want our privacy. Like, making sure everyone gives them as much attention as possible while saying they don't want attention. Like, that seems to be A'ja Wilson. I'm not joking. Do you remember this? Or not this? Remember this troll? Every time the Fever scored, the crowd would erupt, but didn't feel like fans were rooting for their team. It felt like a threat. There was an ominous feeling. This is basically how A'ja Wilson described playing in Indiana. She's like, the WNBA is taken. It's weird to see. It feels like a lot of people have been, like, this makes sense. A lot of people of a certain race have been criticized. Of course they have. It's basketball. It's basketball. I'm sorry. Have you ever seen what anyone says about Christy Wallace? Have you ever seen what the Caitlin Clark haters say about Caitlin Clark? It's basketball. Have you not seen the Luka Doncic is fat is a thing? Like basketball fans have been calling Luka Doncic fat since the day he joined the NBA. I'm sorry, like, the scrutiny that all these players are getting is minuscule compared to NBA fans. And the fact is, a lot of it's coming from NBA fans. Like, they had Trey's balding chance going in New York a couple of years back. Like, it really has, in my sense, because it feels like we're not timid, but it's like you don't want us to do stuff. You don't want us to hear the noise. It strips from the genuine happiness and pureness and love of the game. Like, I just don't want to go on this road. I know it's going to be some idiotic person going to talk crazy when I have to continue to take the high road. That gets exhausting. That's something I've really seen this year and I've never had to do before. It's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. And you constantly have to live in that life for months. What are you talking about? Like, no offense to A'ja Wilson, from the second this season started, all it is A'ja Wilson's MVP. She's going to be back-to-back champion, even though the Aces have sucked from the start of the season. From the start of the season, the Aces have been a bang average team. Like, it's not bang average. They've been the fourth or fifth best team from day one. They haven't been good. They have not been good. They've had a couple of good games. They've not been good from day one. But still, even at 6-6, it was A'ja Wilson unanimous MVP. At that stage, the Sun were 11-0 and the Liberty were 10-1. But the player on a 6-6 team with 2 other Olympians and Tiffany Hayes came back, was the unanimous MVP. Cool. From day one. It is what it is. She had the record-breaking season in a Russell Westbrook way. She's going to win MVP. That's fine. But then she says, randomly, I dreaded being in Indiana, not because it was like the city. I just don't want nothing to pop off. What are you talking about? Dreaded being in Indiana. All those 12-year-old girls in the crowd, you were scared of them? And look, I get it. I understand not kind of wanting to play the Fever if you're chronically online with social media, but this is just like a pity thing. We have Sue Bird. We have Sue Bird talking about how being like, these aren't Fever fans. Like, we're seeing the games. These aren't Fever fans. These aren't Caitlin Clark fans. And then you go and continue to try to make sure that this is, that you bring up, oh, Indiana's the problem. Indiana's the problem. Your fans booed Dearica Hamby. Do you want to know what the most hostile environment in person this season was? Not in Indiana. Not one player has complained about the Indiana crowd. Nobody. No player. Heck, the players have talked about how great the Indiana crowd is. How great the crowd are. Heck, Satu Sabli is like, I wish they were supporting us, but it's great to see the crowd. Until the season ended and we saw the one person with the nails thing, and I'm sorry, one idiot fan, there were 600,000 fans that showed up to watch Caitlin Clark and the Fever play. And Kelsey Mitchell and Leah Boston. If one fan doing something idiotic means that all the fans are bad, then fair enough. Then what about the 10,000 Aces fans that booed the Dearica Hamby every time she touched the ball? It is what it is. It is what it is. Like, I'm not going to blame Aja Wilson, who also 100% backed Becky Hammond in that situation. I'm not going to blame Aja Wilson for not speaking out about that because she didn't have to. She didn't have to. But obviously, her goal is not. And I think that, like, she's the queen bee. She's the queen bee. Her goal is like, look, I don't know what's going on. I don't know anything about America. Heck, I barely know anything about women. But it looks like something out of Gossip Girl. I watched Gossip Girl and this sounds like the exact tactics Blair used. Like, it actually is mental. It is mental. Like, this is the type of stuff that I didn't think happened in real life. Like, I didn't think it happened. I actually didn't think this type of stuff happened in real life. That, like, Aja Wilson's goal this whole season has been me, make sure as hell Caitlin Clark is the villain. She has done everything in her power to make sure that Caitlin Clark is seen as a villain. And it's just not acceptable. It is not acceptable, the stuff that, like, she's done. And again, we can't forget, she's talking about hostile environments in some crowd. I mean, I'm sorry, like, I'm guessing it was an ominous feeling when all those 12-year-olds started screaming. I'm guessing that was your ominous feeling when you know. And I heard it, and another thing was like, oh, we thought the Fever fans were going to riot if they won. It's like, so you were complaining that sports fans were going to be crazy if they win a game. As a Leeds fan, we sing I Predict a Riot at the end of every game. And look, I'm not going to compare soccer fans to WNBA fans. But I'm sorry, the only excuse for saying we didn't want anything to pop off in Indiana is if you're just not used to crowds. And I'm sorry, you were at the Liberty. That Liberty crowd were as rowdy as anything Indiana have had this year. And I mean, look, the Aces crowd aren't particularly rowdy unless it's booing one of their former players. So maybe I get it. But, like, look, I'm sorry. She's the most unlikable player in the WNBA. And I really don't care. I don't care what people say. She's the most unlikable player in the entire league. And I don't have a problem with 99% of players. I think the hate for a lot of players is completely unjustified. Like, I think a lot of the Brittany Griner hate is unjustified. I think, as far as the Fever are concerned, I've said it plenty of times. The most likable people on that team, the most likable person on the team is Erica Wheeler. I think Aaliyah Boston, the fact that she is unbelievably likable is the reason why she's going to get commercials and it's the reason why she's going to be pushed. But I'm sorry, like, Aja Wilson is talking about how much she hates being Aja Wilson, and then as soon as the story is anything but Aja Wilson, she makes sure either through her or a coach, it's look at me, look at me, look at me. 22, other 22 bad. This 22 good, other 22 bad. Which number 22 has been uplifting other players? Which number 22 has been trying to put down other players? In the media. I'm not going to lie. Which 22 is growing the league? Which 22 is holding back the league? Which 22 is better? That's a debate. That's a debate. I think as far, one of them is significantly better on the defensive end. One of them is better by about that much on the offensive end. And the other one's better by that much on the offensive end. So I'll say the 22 that plays in Las Vegas is still the better of the 22s. But I think she was, for lack of a better word, She was the face. She was the face of a dying league. If you've looked about how Breanna Stewart has been treated before this season, before Caitlin Clark became the face, they tried to do exactly what they're doing to Caitlin Clark to Breanna Stewart. She just took the high road, as Caitlin Clark is doing. She just took the high road. But as long as they're trying to push AJ Wilson to be the face, like every time a microphone gets put in front of AJ Wilson's face, she said, in my opinion, she says something that paints her in a worse light. Because I think any sane person knows that, yes, the online stuff is bad. I can guarantee you AJ Wilson's had to read horrible stuff online. And it's not right. It's not right. But I think any sane person knows that Indiana Fever team, those players, those fans that showed up in person had nothing to do with that. The parents that were bringing their children to games. Children, like that crowd was 50% children. Children from all walks of life, all different races. And one of the great things about that Indiana team is you could see sport is the great uniter. And yes, some of the online stuff was horrible. But in that Gamebridge crowd, on that team, sport, you could see the best things about sport. You could. The worst things about sport is some of the online stuff. The online stuff, the fact that it's never going to end. But AJ Wilson is making sure as hell that she's going to only bring up that stuff because she doesn't want this league to grow unless it's through her. And it's very clear about that. Every time she's talking about hating being AJ Wilson, there's a look at me type interview very, very soon. And the funny thing is that this is not, for me, this is not like a people want AJ Wilson to shut up and dribble. Because at the end of the day, I have absolutely no issue with a player who believes in something taking a stand on it. I don't. I have absolutely no issue with that. Like, I have absolutely no issue with what AJ Griffin's doing in the NBA. I have no issue if a player wants to take a little bit of time off for other stuff. I have so much respect for what Maya Moore did. I have no issues with that. And because reality is everybody makes decisions in their own life for whatever reason. And if somebody believes they're doing something for the greater good, no matter what I think, I will always respect that decision. Even whether I agree or not, even if I think it's a crazy decision, I'll respect that if they think it's for the greater good. If they think it's going to improve their life and if it's what they want to do. But if 90% of the decisions, the points that you are pushing is not even taking a stand on anything other than you all, and that's not talking about Caitlin Clark thing, just everybody else in the league, bad. Me, top. And if you're doing anything that stops me being on the top of this league, I'm going to do whatever the hell I can to tear you down. And that seems to be the Aces philosophy as well. And look, I could be wrong. I could be very wrong. And I mean that. I could be incredibly, incredibly wrong with this. But I'm just judging by what AJ has put out publicly in the last year. And it's a pity because she's somebody that realistically isn't going to be the face of the WNBA because Caitlin Clark exists. And for people saying that like it's something not to do with basketball, no, it's not. No, it's not, because I think the most hyped player other than Caitlin Clark is Juju Watkins. Juju Watkins is a bigger name than AJ Wilson. No offense to AJ Wilson. Juju Watkins is a bigger name than AJ Wilson. Aaliyah Boston is more marketable than AJ Wilson. It's the truth. Like, I don't dislike AJ Wilson the player, and I don't know AJ Wilson the person. All I know is the public, what AJ Wilson has come out in public, is completely insufferable. It is completely insufferable. And the fact is that this is not that far off what she said. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen written. This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen written. One of the dumbest things I've ever seen written. This is dumber than the guy in 2021 that gave Derrick Rose his number one vote for MVP. 10 years after when he came off the bench for the season. That's dumber than the guy who did that. And the fact is that AJ Wilson basically said the same thing. She basically said the same thing. She was like, I was scared in Indiana because shit's going to go off. And I'm like, well, you went to the game. You said the city's not a problem, so you went to the game. Your problem was, you basically didn't just like, oh, shit was going off, so I scared Indiana. So the in-person crowd were the problem. So those 12-year-old girls going crazy. Those parents so happy that their like daughters were interested in sports, bringing them. The young girls, young boys. Like, we've never seen as many young boys be interested in women's basketball before. And that's the thing where it's like, I think as the years have gone on, the like anti-WNBA rhetoric for years, like the stuff, had been indoctrined in like lads. I think it had been. The women's basketball is not fun is something that people were told from a young age, only watch men's basketball. And like, as somebody that grew up in a club where we had a men's and women's Superleague team, I always watched both. So which is why like I've no issue basketball. But it is indoctrined, especially in America, in young kids. And the Fever, the Liberty, heck, even the Aces, what the WNBA is doing this year and women's college basketball is stopping that. You're seeing 10-year-old lads going to these games, cheering for the players like they're some of their favorite players. So the league's in such a great place. And what the Fever have done, minus Caitlin Clark, is still, like, I would say, is right up there with the gold standard. I think what the Liberty have done. And the problem is that A'ja Wilson could have been in that position where she could have been so dominant that even if Caitlin Clark is the face of the league, even if Juju's the face of the league, she could have been so dominant that the GOAT conversation is all people are going to talk about. But no. A'ja Wilson's not happy about it. And we saw from the Nike thing, she's going to do whatever she can to make sure that she stays on top. And rather than letting her play do the talking, rather than just dominating, which she has done in her defense, she is making sure as hell that she's going to tear down everyone else. She's going to try to tear down everyone else. And all she's doing is making sure the A'ja fan group are, in fact, like, people talk about the Caitlin Clark fan group being crazy. They're not even real fans. Like, and I'm not talking about the internet trolls. The hardcore Caitlin Clark fans, every player has a hardcore fan base. Every team has a hardcore fan base that are crazy, that are fanatics. And they're all going to say and do things out of pocket. Not what the trolls are doing, but they're all going to go too far. But there's Caitlin crazies, the Angel crazies. All that's happened now is that the South Carolina A'ja Wilson fans have become the most toxic of all this group. And it is now a fact that the vast majority of neutral fans, most of the Reese fans, most of the Clark fans, strongly dislike her. It's bad. And the A'ja Wilson problem is not getting better. It's not getting better. And it is going to be a huge problem for the W as long as they keep pushing it as, if you don't think A'ja's the GOAT, you're the problem. Because the reality is that A'ja's going to be in the GOAT conversation, but it's one of those things that it's being force-fed to people, not letting her dominance do the talking. We have to be told that she's the GOAT. And if you don't agree, you're wrong. And the reality is that she's not taking over Maya Moore. She hasn't taken over Taurasi. She's on that trajectory. But the fact she's had one of the most dominant seasons of all time, but the media headlines have nothing to do with basketball, that's on her. That's on her and her alone.